Hello, welcome to the Comic Book Commentary. I'm Bo Leidig, and I noticed it had been a little while since I had talked about one of my absolute favorite comic book series of all time, so I figured I'd change that this week with East of West number 4. So let's zoom in and take a closer look. First published in July of 2013, we see here that the cover of number 4 follows with the same design aesthetic of the previous 3 issues, and this design aesthetic stays through the entire series for the main covers. Obviously, every issue had 1 or 2 variants that were either a different monochrome color for the top or just a completely unique design altogether. But this is something I actually always appreciated about East of West. Despite it being such a minimalist design in its presentation, it was always very eye-catching in terms of it stood out against everything else that was around it on the shelf. You never had to look very hard to find East of West on the shelf because it looked so completely different than anything else that it was next to, which is really kind of a testament to the graphic design choices that they used for this cover. Jonathan Hickman, writer. Nick Dragotta, artist. Frank Martin, colors. Russ Wooten, letters. The story, of course, picks up exactly where it left off in issue number 3. We can see here in New Shanghai, the House of Mao is preparing for an all-out battle with these gunships, and we've got mech walkers and literally thousands and thousands of troops, all preparing for the fact that death has actually arrived at their door. That's not any kind of exaggeration. Death himself is at their door, and they're facing off against one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And with death literally at their door, Mao V turns back and asks his daughter, Zhao Lian, if it was worth it. She remembers back to a time where she was embracing death and giving him a passionate kiss, and she responds yes. On the next page comes a bit of a quote from Zhao Lian stating, "When I was a child, you taught me regret was for the weak. How can you expect me to feel such a thing now?" And this is the kind of writing that makes me absolutely love this book more than anything. It's so good, man. I just can't get enough of it. We then get the big 2-page splash with the East of West logo on it, and we find out that issue number 4's title is Last Deals of Dead Men. Now, while most comic books have a title for each individual issue, generally I feel like it's kind of lost in the shuffle, like being placed on the reverse of the front inside cover. And it's there, it's fine, but a lot of times if you never read it, it wouldn't matter to the story. Whereas I feel like the team behind East of West wants to make sure you know exactly what the title is for every individual issue and to draw your attention to it on this page so that you read it. Which I kind of respect, that they really put an emphasis on, hey, no, pay attention to what the title of this issue is. On the next page, it says, "Keep your great society, take it with you to the grave." We then see that the messenger that Mao V sent out with an offer for a peace agreement with Death has returned, informing Mao V that Death has rejected his terms. Mao responds by stating, "It always comes down to this, doesn't it? The world is one with violence." He then formally addresses his forces, stating, sons and daughters, dragons and widowmakers, a man seeks to come and destroy our great house. Will we let him? And they all respond in a collective no. He then says, no, we won't. We will greet him and make an example of him, because those who would challenge House Mao all face the exact same repercussion. And what is that? Well, we're going to find out in just a second. Before the troops can respond, there is a massive explosion blasting the gates of the walls surrounding Shanghai wide open, and through those gates ride none other than Death, accompanied by Crow and Wolf. The soldiers shout to open fire. However, at this point, we find out that Death's weird robotic horse mount is actually a rideable laser cannon, as he rears up on it, and it then plants its feet and unleashes a massive destructive blast in front of it, shredding everyone caught in its wake. actually creating a bit of a chasm in front. The blast is so powerful. At this point, Crow looks out and states there's so many of them, and this is where Hickman's writing comes back into play, as Death responds by simply stating, "All I see is air, and a bunch of dead men soon not needing to breathe it." He instructs Wolf and Crow to keep all of the soldiers off of him as the three of them lunge into battle, surrounded by thousands of troops and mech walkers and gunships, and none of them even seem remotely fearful of the fact that they're outnumbered however many to one, a crazy amount, as Death seems a man possessed trying to free his wife, riding into the heart of battle, unleashing shot after shot from his revolver, and the battle is underway and it's getting hot and heavy real fast. As the battle intensifies, we see the three just laying waste to the House of Mao troops as Death is just opening fire with his revolver, and we see Crow and Wolf just going hand-to-hand melee, shredding people. One of the soldiers unleashes a rocket at Death. His mount, however, ducks under it, and Death then jumps off the mount. However, we notice that his mount does something very strange here and burrows its front end into the ground as Death continues to make his way through the crowd, taking shot after shot, killing more and more troops. However, while all of this is happening, Zhao Lian's sister Hu, who is one of the chosen, looks down upon the three and states that they're animals and butchers. However, her father has a different opinion. He notices that the three of them are steadfast in their resolve and giving literally no concern to the cost or the loss of life that's being paid for them to accomplish their goals. And he says that their demeanor is to be respected and admired because it is the same as House Mao, that they're willing to pay the cost no matter what. As the battle continues, we see Crow rushing into a group of troops and jumping over them, and in a hail of bullets, breaks her body apart into a literal flock of crows, which now we're starting to see some of the weird and superhuman abilities that she possesses. As this flock continues its assault, it moves as almost like a school of fish or a flock of birds, obviously, and suddenly starts shredding into all of the enemy soldiers. During all of this, Mao V states that when Mao I was driven out of China, he and his followers came to the New World. They started to carve a home for themselves in this new land through blood and sweat and tears, and that Mao II was the one who built this great wall that surrounds their city, but it was Mao III that built a great nation. We then see that Wolf possesses similar abilities to Crow as he takes his cloak and spreads it out, vanishing into it, but then reappearing as a literal pack of white wolves who immediately start to rip into all of the enemy soldiers, even taking down some of the mech walkers, which lead us to believe that there is definitely some sort of supernatural or magic ability behind what they can do, as one of the wolves just literally chomps straight through the armor that one of the soldiers is wearing. As this is happening, Mao V explains that Mao III realized that the land that they now inhabited was weak from civil wars, so he created his own force and unleashed it upon an unsuspecting world. And within a generation, the House of Mao had conquered literally a third of America. And that while 20 million soldiers died to realize that vision, it was a small cost to pay to achieve their greater goal. At this point, however, the battle seems to be starting to get a little out of hand, as even the soldiers surrounding the family here up on the platform have started to open fire. And Zhao Lian asks her father, "And now what do you see before you, father?" And he grits his teeth and simply says ruin, as one of the gunships, which was being surrounded by the flock of crows, crashes into the middle of the forces and there's a huge explosion. At this point, we see Mao V look forward and just scream out the word no, as he realizes that things aren't actually looking good for them right now, and there's a real potential that this is not going to go his way. Mao the Fifth then turns his head the other direction, screaming no again, as we see Death's mount pull its front end out from the ground as it seems to have what looks to be magma dripping from the front of it, which leads me to believe that this is the source of its ammunition, that it's literally pulling actual magma from the earth to, I guess, fuel its giant laser cannon, as it rears up behind Death and then unleashes a sweeping blast through all of the soldiers in front of it, just laying waste as Death himself continues to be an irresistible and inevitable force, just walking through the crowd, unloading his gun, just shots at will, taking them out one by one. During all of this, Zhao Lian tells her father that there's a thing that happens when men who have believed themselves to be giants their whole lives find themselves in the presence of a man who truly is, and that it forces him to see his true worth, and that it shows them their actual place in the world. We then see Mao collapse down onto his knees, realizing that this battle is already over and that he has lost and that he's wagered everything on the deal that he made with the horsemen and that now everything is lost. However, his other daughter, Hu, decides to grab her father and state, no, father, it's not over. You know, the battle's not lost. They haven't won yet, but it's no longer safe here, as we see the wolves and the crows starting to attack the soldiers that accompany them. However, we do notice something very interesting here where the wolves seem to be tethered back to where Wolf's body originally split up into them, which is very thought-provoking. I'm not sure exactly what that means quite yet, but we're going to find out later on, I'm sure. However, it's interesting to also note that Crow does not have this exact same thing going on. Now, this may be because the crows are moving as a continuous flock, but the wolves also seem to be moving as a continuous pack as well, so I'm not sure. But at this point, Hu is trying desperately to get her father to follow her so that they can make a steady retreat. However, at this point, Zhao Lian chimes in, stating, "And where will you go, sister? You can't hide from death or from me. It's over," as we see Hu pull out some sort of collapsible, foldable sword, which I know seems kind of cool and futuristic, but when you think about it from any kind of like mechanical physics perspective, it's not something that should ever be real. However, we are in some super futuristic sci-fi world, so I guess we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. She then tells her sister that there's no running from fate, and here at the end, you should at least face your destiny. And this enrages Hu. She's like, my destiny from you, as she lunges forward, takes a swipe, and Zhao Lian ducks under it, getting her ponytail cut in the process. Hu then tells Zhao Lian that the only reason that she's still alive is because their father had commanded that she be allowed to live, and that the only reason she's still breathing right now is because Hu has allowed it, and that she is now no longer beholden to that order, and she intends to kill her sister. As she lunges forward for her final attack, Zhao Lian reaches up and catches her blade mid-swipe with one of her cybernetic hands. She then tells Hu that she looks back on who she used to be with shame, and that she believed she was as hard as stone and as sharp as steel, but she knows now that neither of those things were true, as we see a flashback from when she was fighting the three horsemen who have been pursuing Death, mainly war, conquest, and I'm assuming this is Famine holding her arms out, as we see Hu coming up with the flaming sword of war, and it's basically implied that she's the one who cut Zhao Lian's hands off. At this point, Zhao Lian grabs her sister's head and states that she is now as hard as stone and as sharp as steel, and that it is her sister who showed her that she needed to become these things, and that's the reason that she became these things, and for that she thanks her, as she then crushes her sister's head with her hand and makes it explode like a melon. Brutal. Mao then looks down before him and states, "I have lost everything." However, Zhao Lian chimes in and says, "I am still here, father, and your people still fight for you." However, he replies by stating, "They die poorly and without purpose, just as I will." However, Jalian responds by saying, "No, father, I cannot protect you from death, nor would I try. But if you want, you will die by my hand. I do owe you that much." So he then raises his head up, accepting his fate, stating, "All that remains of House Mao now belongs to you. Remember what I taught you and do something better with it than I did." She then states, "Farewell, father, I will miss you, but the world will not," as she turns and with one swipe takes his head clean off. Ice cold. She then grabs the microphone and addresses the armies of House Mao, stating, "Listen to me, Mao is dead. I am now the House of Mao. On your knees." We then see the entirety of all of House Mao's forces fall to their knees immediately as Jalian tells them that the fighting will stop now, that they have all lost too much, and that they have all paid too high a price for far too long. As she looks out across the crowd with tears coming down from her eyes as she meets the gaze of Death, the man she loves. And we don't know if these tears are from the loss of her father and her sister, or if she's just truly happy to once again be reunited with the man she loves, or maybe possibly both. We are then teleported to the residence of one Mr. Andrew Archibald Chamberlain, who is lying in bed smoking a cigar, surrounded by a bunch of beautiful naked young women, as he watches all the events of the battle unfold on a large video screen. He then states, "Wow, that man's gone and lost his head. Ones of high quality are downright hard to come by these days, because heads ain't a buyer's market." He then looks across the room, and we see that he is joined up also by the other three horsemen of the apocalypse, as he states, "Why don't we celebrate to us all having our heads still attached to our shoulders? Now, what is it that Mr. Chamberlain can do for the little children?" At this point, Famine states, "Death has acquired a list of all of the names of the chosen, and that's how we lost the Union president." War then states, "He's most certainly coming for everyone on the list, which includes you," and Conquest asks Chamberlain if he's seen Death. Now, of course, we know that Death and Chamberlain did have a meeting, and that Chamberlain convinced Death not to kill him as he was too useful to him. He then provided Death with the information that Jalian was still alive and where he could find her, and struck up a deal with him that he would work with Death to try and prevent the other horsemen from finding him, and also to help him track down everyone else on the list. Of course, he makes sure not to bring up any of this to the other three horsemen, as he simply states, "If I had met with Death, do you think I'd still be alive chatting with you here today?" And Famine says, "You know, a silver-tongued devil like yourself, I could see it." And War agrees, stating that such a thing would be short-term thinking, but it's possible. And Chamberlain asks, "Well, am I to then ask if and wonder, are you genuinely concerned about my well-being, or do you have some other motive?" And Famine responds by stating, "Our only motive is to make sure that the message and the prophecy is fulfilled." Then War states that while, the shapes of Death's actions do cause them some concern and even appear to be a bit suspicious, that the only thing that matters is that the chosen fulfill their role and that the message is fulfilled. And at that point, Conquest chimes in and states that all unbelievers and the compromised will be punished. And this is a not so veiled threat made towards Chamberlain, as the three of them are smart enough to know that he's not to be underestimated. However, Chamberlain is not impressed as he gets to his feet and states, "Well, as long as we're being honest here, I should point out that Death is on the other side of the world while the three of you are right here. And I would say that the three of you have started to become what you appear to be, which is a bunch of wet-legged children. And that you should all be fulfilling your own proper roles and not be so concerned about what those around you are doing." This, of course, infuriates War as he leans forward, stating, "You dare." And Chamberlain says, "Indeed I do. What do you think I'm afraid of in this room? The three of you? War? I've known war my whole life. Conquest? I'm a conquistador. And Famine? Well, lean times are only for the peasants now, aren't they? And do I not look like a man whose wants have far outweighed or surpassed his needs?" He then tells them, as he starts to walk across the room that there's only one thing that he fears, and that's the same thing that the three of them fear, death. And that the only difference between him and them is that he actually understands death while they don't. And he then goes on to start to explain that they still can't come to grasp as to why the four are now three, and they can't figure out what happened. He then tells them that he knows exactly what happened. She happened. And who is she? She is the rightful heir of the House Mao. She is a great leader, and she is a great nation. Chamberlain continues as we reach the final page of the story by saying, she is Zhao Lian, and you should fear her as much as you fear him, for she is the woman who conquered death, as we see Crow, Wolf, and even Death himself kneel before her. And we now understand what it is that the horsemen are so worried about, as the world has now changed significantly from what it was just the previous day. And we come to the very end of this part of the story. We then reach a spotlight on other Image books all through here. I do not have all of these books, I'm going to be honest. Image publishes quite a lot of comic books, and I do not have infinite money to buy them all with, nor infinite time to read them all. And we then reach a section called The Third Degree, which is an interview section. This, of course, being an interview with Matt Fraction, the writer of The Third Degree. I've never read The Third Degree. If you have and have any information you'd like to share about it in the comments section below, feel free to do so, because I'd like to know a little bit more about it. And any of the other books you see over here on the left-hand side. Obviously, if you follow my channel, you know that I am a big fan of Lazarus, Spawn, Savage Dragon. I love Invincible. I wish I had a bunch of Invincible, because I don't. That one just snuck in under my radar, and by the time I realized it was a thing, it was too expensive to go back and buy all the issues. Clone is super cool. I have that entire series. There's a few others that I would have liked to have gotten into, but just didn't have the money or the time, and maybe one day I will. And on the final page and reverse inside cover, we get into a little bit of a campaign that Image was doing at this time called What's Next and Who's Next. So What's Next is illustrating, or drawing attention to, I should say, a book called Fall. And Who's Next is drawing attention to Nick Dragata, which is kind of funny. I mean, I know this is an ad that they were running across their entire lineup, but it is funny that they printed it in the book that he's drawing. Like, you don't know who this guy is if you're reading this book. It's just kind of a little bit of a chuckle I got out of that one. And that was East of West number 4. And if you haven't guessed by now, I love this book. I love everything about this book, as I have the previous 3 issues. The story of East of West is phenomenal. My only criticism, I guess, would possibly be that the artwork is not horrible in any way, but it's also not amazing either. But then again, I feel like it really fits the tone of this book, and that its presentation melds itself perfectly with the story. Also, I can't say enough good things about the way that Hickman writes the dialogue for these characters, and how you really see each character's personality shine through the way that they speak. That's really hard to do, and it really speaks volumes to how talented Hickman is. I also love how, this entire issue was simply about one battle, and Death coming to free his imprisoned lover that he thought was dead. And now she's one of the leaders of one of the most powerful factions in the entirety of America, all through the events of a single day. It's such a wild ride, and the further in you get, the more crazy the story gets, but it never seems to get away. I really love this story. Again, I know I'm kind of gushing here, but this is a book I absolutely fell in love with immediately from the first time that I picked up the first issue, and stuck with all the way till the completion of its run. And I always try to do my best to try and draw attention to it, because I feel like it's one of those sneaky good books that snuck in under the radar, and a lot of people don't know about it. But then again, not everyone's going to share that opinion with me. Your opinion might be that this book wasn't very good at all, or you found the story uninteresting or disjointed. And if that's the case, it's okay because everyone's entitled to their own opinions. If you enjoyed today's video, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for stopping by. Have a great day.